What's up, everyone? Welcome to Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Bafflestone. So today we're having another episode of my character build series. Today presenting to you Bilbron Artillerist. And I have to say I am so pumped to present this build to you today. I am really super duper impressed with it, and I had no idea that this was going to happen. I kind of thought that this was going to be a pretty pedestrian build, and no, it's not. It crushes in the damage department. This thing is a wrecking crew, and man, a real pleasant surprise. I will say that I thought that this was going to be the final video of my series on Artificers, but I am going to do one more build because you can get 3 different types of Eldritch Cannons, and one of them, is the classic Artillerist with a decent ranged attack. But 2 of them, the Protector and the Flamethrower, both basically call for melee martial builds. And I actually kind of went in that direction first just because I don't personally like blasting. And I got all the way through tier 2, was about to start tier 3. I was like, this, because I went with the Protector, by the way. I'm defensive minded, and the Protector just calls to me. So I went with like a Protector build. And like I said, when I got to tier 3, I was just like, man, this just doesn't feel like an Artillerist to me. I'm getting all of these blast spells that I don't plan to use. And it just made me think, this isn't the classic Artillerist that, Wizards of the Coast had whiteboarded. And that's kind of the point of this Artificer series, is to basically figure out what that whiteboarded build that they had in mind that they felt was, a challenger to other builds, and even improve on that. And I didn't feel like that build really accomplished that. So I do want to do that build in the next video, just because it is really good, and you should be able to have a build that maximizes the Protector Cannon, because it's a really sweet add. But this build is what I think of as a classic Artillerist, where you are just blowing stuff up from range. And it really, really works. Again, I want to call out the boys in the Patreon Discord. The quality of the work that we are providing, I think, is just second to none. And they're a critical part of the process. These things are not nearly, they're just way better. Thanks, guys. If you want to be a part of that, you can check out the Patreon, and please like, subscribe, comment, share, all of that. So without further ado, let's take a look at the Artillerist. So I have put the setup on the screen, and we can see what we're doing here. Bilbron Artillerist is going to be custom race with Strength 8, Dex 14, Con 14, Intelligence 18, Wisdom 12, and Charisma 8. He comes with Dark Vision, and as always, I'll be comparing our build DPR to a standard DPR baseline of Agonizing Blast plus Hex hitting 60% of the time, and an elite DPR baseline of a fighter with Fighting Style Archery, Crossbow Expert, and Sharpshooter hitting 70% of the time. It's also important to note that I present the build DPR in modular form so that you know what you're doing round to round based on the choices that you make. And if you want to know what you are doing over the course of what you consider to be an average battle, you're going to have to do a little bit more math, but I've at least provided you the figures so that you can do that. Our play style is going to be as a ranged caster or a blaster. It's kind of in the name, Artillerist, and the spell list is full of blasts, so alright, we're going to roll with this. I'm not personally a fan of blasting, but that doesn't mean I can't still make blaster builds. I am adding something new here, however. I'm going to be color coding our DPR column so that the boxes will be red if they are below the standard DPR baseline, yellow if they are above standard but below the elite DPR baseline, green if they are above the elite DPR baseline, and white if they are way above the elite DPR baseline, by which I mean they are 120% of it. This is a new add to the character sheets that I'm really pleased with. I think it very elegantly shows the power of the builds, and so let me know what you think of it in the comments. So at level 1, we are Artificers, and there are no dips in this build, so we're going straight Artificer all the way to 20. Our starting feat will be Fey Touched, and from our class we get Magical Tinkering, 2 cantrips, 4 spell preps, and spell slots 3/1, with 2 of those devoted towards the Fey Touched ones, of course. Our cantrips will be Guidance and Magic Stone. Guidance is self-explanatory, and Magic Stone will be our main attacks at levels 1 and 2 until our Eldritch Cannon comes online. Our spell preps will be Misty Step and Gift of Alacrity from Fey Touched, and from our class we'll take Absorb Elements, Expeditious Retreat, Featherfall, and Tasha's Caustic Brew. So Misty Step and Gift of Alacrity came with Fey Touched. Misty Step is always elite, but especially for Artificer, who doesn't normally get teleport options, except for Boots of the Winding Path, which is terrible. And because we're ranged, Misty Step is awesome because it will allow us to access safe shooting positions. Gift of Alacrity is awesome as one of the best options for any class, but especially for blasters, because we are typically going to want to win initiative so we can get our blast down before our allies engage and friendly fire becomes an issue. Now, the problem with Gift of Alacrity is that it is Dunamancy, so it's not going to be allowed at every single table. And if your DM doesn't allow Fey Touched to take a Dunamancy spell, then something like Dissonant Whispers or Command or Hex would be appropriate. Absorb Elements is self-explanatory. Expeditious Retreat should be self-explanatory at this point, one of my no-brainers that I add to every build that has it available. And Featherfall for utility. I'm trying to reserve most of my slots for the Eldritch Cannon at 3rd and for blasting, so I'm trying to add a few more utility spells. And we had Tasha's Caustic Brew as our primary blasting option. It is concentration, but we don't really have many demands on our concentration right now. And it does okay damage. We can expect about 3 per person per round, and we can expect to hit 2 enemies, maybe 3 or 4 best case scenario. So that's a decent offensive blast in Tier 1. We can stack it with other blasts since it's pretty rare to see a persistent blast based on concentration. And do note that once we lay down the Tasha's Caustic Brew, we can just take the dodge action, and that will give us a better concentration, and it might just kill them over time. And don't forget that Artificers get Magical Tinkering, which is pretty cool for a quote-unquote ribbon. So see my deep dive series video on Magical Tinkering for more info about how cool that is. And for our armor, we will go with Scale Mail plus Dex plus Shield for a solid 18 at level 1. Our round 1 is going to be pretty simple. We are either going to blast or attack, and if we need to, we'll cast as a bonus action Magic Stone. That puts our DPR box in red. We are at 5.1, which is a tick below the standard baseline and only like half of the elite DPR baseline. So we're not doing amazing at level 1, but we'll get through it. And this is the last level that we ever see red. At level 2, infusions come online, and to our preps we add Detect Magic, just as a ritual to ease pressure on our spell slots. We've already got a lot of demands on them and not that many. Our infusions known will be Enhanced Defense, Homunculus, Spell Rot Tattoo, and Bag of Holding. And our infusions active will be Enhanced Defense and Homunculus. Enhanced Defense is self-explanatory. The Homunculus will provide a DPR bump and utility, but don't get used to it. We're going to drop it at the next level. We will add a familiar through the Spell Rot Tattoo. This is possible rules as written, but check with your DM. It might have been an oversight by Wizards of the Coast, and he might think it's overpowered, in which case you can take a different infusion. Here we'll assume that we can add the Owl for the Flyby Help action to reliably impart advantage on a single attack. And note for choosing the colors of the DPR boxes, we're going to be applying it one time to the most sensible option. It's going to fluctuate from level to level. Note that the Owl can also deliver touch spells for us, so from our build we have Guidance, Cure Wounds, Lesser Restoration, Rope Trick, Revivify, and Freedom of Movement that we can use for that. And it's also good for defense and utility. See my deep dive series video on Advanced Familiar Tactics for more info. Finally, we added the Bag of Holding for special occasions. It might offer some utility one day, or we might want to use the Bag of Holding bomb tactic one day if the DM allows it. For our armor, I presume we can afford to switch to Half Plate, so we're going with Half Plate plus Dex plus Shield plus Enhanced Defense for a solid 20 at level 2. Our rounds 1 and 2 change up a bit, and we add the Homunculus attack. Try to have your magic stones ready to go by casting it every minute while you're adventuring, and that way you don't have to cast it in round 1 and you can go right to the Homunculus attack. And adding the Homunculus changes our DPR box to green. We are now exceeding the elite DPR baseline at level 2. At level 3, we officially become Artillerists, and Eldritch Cannon is online. We switch up our cantrips a bit to add Firebolt and drop Magic Stone. Firebolt will now be our main attack. We're dropping Magic Stone here to free up bonus action Clog with the Eldritch Cannon. Also because we can't keep Magic Stone past Tier 1 because it doesn't scale at level 5 like the other cantrips. So it just makes sense to do it now. And Firebolt is pretty sweet. I really do like Firebolt as the only cantrip that can target objects. I mean, you can destroy a whole town with nothing but a cantrip. That's pretty cool, See my deep dive series video on cantrips for more info about how Firebolt stacks up against the other cantrips. Spoiler alert, I rate it pretty highly. However, fire damage is unreliable. Frankly, it's lame as your main option. 7.8% of all enemies are resistant and 5.8% of all enemies are immune. That's a problem. That's one of the most common ones. However, this is built into the subclass, so we are just going to have to work around it as best we can. I mean, at least our Force Ballista is going to be doing force damage. But as such, Ray of Frost is going to be our backup energy type for when fire resistance or immunity is a problem. And I get it that it's not a perfect solution because there are some things out there with resistance or immunity to both, but it's a much smaller percentage and we really don't have too many other options. So we're going to go with Ray of Frost as our backup, but we won't add it until next level because we can only swap out one cantrip per level. So we'll keep Guidance for another level and just bring in Firebolt and drop Magic Stone here. And when we do add Ray of Frost, note that it is a decent debuff for us. Because we are ranged and we want to control the range, reducing the move of an enemy can help with that. To our spell preps, we add Shield and Thunder Wave, both of which came with the subclass, and both are excellent for this build. Shield is self-explanatorily amazeballs for a class that doesn't normally get it. Thunder Wave is a decent AoE blast for us. Does pretty solid damage, and you may note that I'll be putting the expected damage and the expected number of enemies that we can hit on the screen. And so Thunder Wave is okay. It's not great with our playstyle as we prefer not to be that close, but sometimes enemies don't give you a choice about that, and if they're in your face, Thunder Wave is a cool option. Do want to point out that we are half casters, so we're not great in terms of the amount of slots that we have available for blasting, but I promise you we make it work. It's not going to be an issue for us. Do note, however, that most of our first level slots should go to the Eldritch Cannon. Speaking of which, the Eldritch Cannon is now online. It has a 1 hour duration and takes an action to manifest, so that is annoying. Always try to have one ready to go before battle begins, because creating it during combat is going to be bad for our action economy, but I get it, there's no choice sometimes. Just do your best to manage it. Note that it's a magical object, so it is thus immune to the damage of most spells, for example, Shatter. There are not very many spells that affect objects. If we're using the small version that's self-propelled, note that it will not incur opportunity attacks or anything else that strictly applies to creatures. For example, most spells, like Web or Grease. It's also immune to all conditions, so it would ignore things like Nets or Grapple. Again, it's not a creature, it's a magical object. Now, I favor the tiny version that attaches to us. It just seems more manageable to me. But the small version is intriguing. It does control more space, it does present another target for enemies to pay attention to as a type of damage soak, and it is fairly durable, and your cleric probably has mending, so you're probably going to be able to get those hit points back without too many resources invested. And it does have a 120-foot range, so if it's independent, you can park it well away from the action if you want. But do remember that we need to be within 60 feet of it to activate it. Now, we're going to choose to use the Force Ballista so that we can blast from range. The Flamethrower and the Protector require us to be too close to the action for my taste. The 15-foot cone of the Flamethrower sucks. The 10-foot radius of the Protector isn't that great. So those call for more melee martial builds. This build pretty much calls for the Force Ballista, and it's nice. 120-foot range is nice, and it does have that push. The push will be sweet to help us gain that 10-foot range that we need to attack with a cantrip without disadvantage. Not to mention all of the other cool stuff that you can do with pushes. As a reminder, when we're using our familiar for the help action, use it on the one that is most sensible, the one that will do more damage. That's going to change from level to level. On a technical note, be aware that the help action does not apply to objects, but technically we are the one making the attack. We're just using the Eldritch Cannon as a tool. So we should be all good from a rules perspective in terms of getting help from our familiar. And we're changing up our infusions known and active a little bit. We are adding the Enhanced Arcane Focus and dropping the Homunculus. The Enhanced Arcane Focus is going to bump our attack cantrips and our Eldritch Cannon, and that's our main thing. And we're dropping the Homunculus because now we have the Eldritch Cannon. They both use the bonus action. They just don't work well together. Final note, we do get Woodcarver's tools. So one of the nice benefits of that is that we can crank out arrows for party members. 5 for short rest, 20 per long rest. It could come in handy. Our rounds 1 and 2 change up a little bit to substitute the ballista attack for the Homunculus and getting rid of Magic Stone. And now our DPR box goes to white. We are significantly higher than the Elite DPR baseline here at level 3, so not bad. At level 4, we switch up our cantrips a little bit to add Ray of Frost as our backup to Firebolt and drop Guidance. We will bring Guidance back at 10. To our preps, we add Cure Wounds and Alarm. Cure Wounds is self-explanatory. Alarm is a ritual just to ease some pressure on our spell slots and as a placeholder that will drop at the next level. And we get our first ASI, which we devote to Intelligence +2 to max out our casting stat. No change to our round 1 and 2, but our DPR box drops to yellow because the Elite DPR baseline got a really big bump at level 4. So we're basically right there. We're only 0.4 behind the Elite DPR baseline. So the build is still performing very well in Tier 1. At level 5, we enter Tier 2, and as always, I've made a list of our cantrip spell preps, Infusions Known and Infusion Active, which I do every time we enter a new tier. And level 5 is a huge level for us. Arcane Firearm comes online, we get second level spells, and our slots double. To our preps, we add Scorching Ray, Shatter, Levitate, Web, and Lesser Restoration, dropping Tasha's Caustic Brew, Detect Magic, and Alarm. Scorching Ray and Shatter came with a subclass, and I don't see myself casting Scorching Ray. It's not that great. It can be a decent blast versus a single target or widespread targets, but its expected damage is divided amongst 1 to 3 enemies, and it doesn't synergize all that well with Arcane Firearm because the damage from that is added only to a single roll. So I don't see casting this ever. All of the other blasts we have available are better, like Shatter. Shatter can be a decent blast versus multiple targets, and it's going to be one of our go-to blasts for a while until Fireball comes online. As we can see, it does solid damage to a solid number of enemies. The big add here, however, is Levitate. Levitate will give us auto wins versus non-flying enemies with no or poor ranged attacks, which is like 70% of creatures. So that's just too good a tactic to ignore. It will be our go-to if appropriate, and we're facing one of those 70% of creatures that can do nothing against a creature up in the air. And it's also a solid save or suck. It's also great utility and mobility. See my deep dive series video on Levitate for more information about how great that spell is. We'll also add Web as an elite offensive control option. It can take down flying creatures that lack hover, can form a barrier between us and enemies trying to close, and we can use our Ballista and Thunderwave to push enemies into the AoE. We add Lesser Restoration for healing the appropriate conditions, and our Arcane Firearm is now online to buff our attack cantrips and our blasts. That's awesome. We are blasters, and now our blasts are better than others, so can't complain about that. No change to round 1 and 2, but our DPR box is once again green as we slightly surpass the Elite DPR baseline. Level 6 is a big level for us as we get Tool Expertise and an Infusions bump. To our spell preps, we add Rope Trick as an ultimate defense option, and it's a great combo with Levitate, because once you're in position, you can go in and out of the portal without having to worry about failing to line up. See my deep dive series video on Rope Trick for more info on that. To our Infusions Known, we'll add the Repulsion Shield and the Mind Sharpener, making active the Repulsion Shield Enhanced Defense and Enhanced Arcane Focus. Repulsion Shield is excellent for a ranged caster, as enemies will generally have to move to get to you, so a push might keep them from being able to close again if they don't have enough move. And the Mind Sharpener for special occasions, we can give it to our party's primary caster if we get real magical items along the way that free up our need for infusions. But the Artificer just gets more Infusions Known that he can use, and there's not that many good ones, so Mind Sharpener is a good one, but it's hard to see when I would actually make it active. No change to our round 1 and 2, and our damage does dip a tad below the Elite baseline, so we're yellow, but still doing pretty well. At level 7, Flash of Genius comes online to bump our initiative, our saves, our Dispel Magic checks, etc., but note that we can't apply it to our initiative if we are surprised. No change to our rounds 1 and 2 or our damage situation. Level 8 is a big level for us. To our preps, we add See Invisible for utility and as a placeholder that will drop at the next level. But we get an ASI and we are adding Ritual Caster. This is a huge add for our build. I want to note right away there is some table dependence involved here, as we're going to need to access scrolls or a wizard ally or some such to add spells to it. And I am going to presume that at most tables, an 8th level PC is going to be able to get these sorts of low-level scrolls fairly easily. But obviously at some tables this will be problematic. So in that case, choose a different ASI. There are lots of choices that work here. I think Elemental Adept, Lucky, Alert, Tough, Metamagic Adept, Shield Master, lots of good options. I think Ritual Caster is the best of those options if the table allows it, but if not, obviously you got to choose something else. In any case, we have Ritual Caster and start with Find Familiar and Unseen Servant. And of course, Find Familiar is awesome. We've been rolling with one since level 2 because of the Spell Rot tattoo. But some DMs are not going to allow that, but they're going to have a harder time disallowing this, so we should be able to get a Familiar through the Ritual Caster. We can now drop Spell Rot tattoo. And Unseen Servant is one of my favorite rituals for that utility. But mostly we are going to be adding other spells. There's tons of great rituals on the wizard list that we can gain access to as discussed above. And note, yes, it does take time and gold to transfer them, which can be annoying at some tables. But again, if Ritual Caster isn't going to work at your table, choose a different one. The main ritual that we want to add is Phantom Steed. This is the big add here. This is going to give us another layer of elite maneuverability and defense that is just amazing on a ranged caster. The crazy high speed, which let me remind you, is 100-foot move and an optional, most of the time, 100-foot dash. It's almost impossible to get faster than this in 5th edition. And that's going to allow us to control the range as a first option, because don't forget, Levitate requires a slot and an action. We should be starting every combat on a Phantom Steed. And so the action economy is just so good. And even crazier, we can actually create a rotation of up to 5 of these and support the entire party. See my deep dive series video on Phantom Steed for more info. Phantom Steed is amazing. I literally rate it the best 3rd level spell in the game. And of course, there are other elite rituals available at this level. Comprehend Languages, Tensor's Floating Disc, Water Breathing, and Tiny Hut leap out to me. And on a technical note, note that we can add our own spells as options if they are also wizard spells, and we can make them into scrolls first, which of course would require Arcana and character creation. Little change to our infusions known, we're going to add the Spell Refueling Ring and drop Spell Rot Tattoo since we have a Familiar through Ritual Caster. And again, we don't really need it, but it's better than Spell Rot Tattoo, so may as well put it on a list. Note that our DPR dipped here as the target AC increased, but the attack bonus didn't, and no change to our round 1 and 2. Our DPR is still yellow, solidly between standard and elite, but trust me guys, we'll keep slogging and things are going to change here pretty soon. At level 9, we add to our spell preps Fireball, Wind Wall, Dispel Magic, and Revivify, dropping See Invisible and Featherfall. So Fireball and Wind Wall came with this subclass, and yeah, I'm happy to add them both. Fireball is the king of the blasts, so of course we want to add it. It'll do over 100 expected damage. So yeah, bring that on. Artificer doesn't normally get too many good blasts. And remember, we're pumping hours through the arcane firearms, so it's going to be doing even better damage. That's why it's 26 per person, which is a nice little bump. It's necessary because we're getting this at 9th level, and Fireball is great at 5th level, and by 9th level it's not as great, but again, ours is better than normal. And Windwall is a really nice spell. It's an interesting combo of both blast and defense that I can see casting sometimes. Not great damage, but it's a combo spell. And it works well with us because both of our cantrips and the ballista are unaffected by it. So be opportunistic and it can be helpful, I think. We add Dispel Magic as a caster must-have. Revivify is self-explanatory. And Explosive Cannon is online for a slight DPR bump. More damage on our ballista is fantastic. And we can blow up the cannon now, which essentially offers Shatter as a 1st level slot, which I don't personally see myself doing all that often, to be honest. If you do, note that you can combo it with Catapult. And talk to the DM about whether the exploding cannon does 3d8 or 4d8 total. There was something of a disagreement in my Discord. You gotta ask if the d8 from the 1st bullet point applies to the 2nd bullet point about it doing 3d8 damage. I can see it going either way, so figure it out with your DM. And like I said, it's kind of academic because don't blow up your cannon. No change to our round 1 and 2, and our damage is still not quite up to the elite DPR baseline, but it's very close at this point. And spoiler alert, guys, this is the very last level that we don't exceed the elite DPR baseline. This build is starting to get a little crazy from here on out at level 10 because we get an infusions bump, magic item adept, and 10th level infusions. This is where this build really starts to take off. We get a cantrip, so we add guidance, guidance being self-explanatory. To our preps, we add Tiny Servant and Blur, dropping Levitate. Tiny Servant as a little helper for utility and defense and to manage our SSI at the next level. Also for rest tricking. See my separate deep dive series videos on Tiny Servant and rest tricking for more info. We're going to add Blur as an elite defensive option. Unlike other builds, it's not a first option for us. It's just a backup option in case enemies threaten to close the range, in which case we combine it with our great AC and we're going to be doing all right. And also note that through Ritual Caster we can access 5th level rituals, specifically Contact Other Plane and Rary's Telepathic Bond. Contact Other Plane is amazeballs for our build. One, Artificer doesn't normally get divination, so this is a really nice different dimension to add for us. And 2, with Flash of Genius, and later when we get lucky in Soul of Artifice, we're basically never going to fail the intelligence save versus insanity. I mean, God forbid we throw in a Paladin ally. Regardless, we're going to be able to spam this. And spamming Contact Other Plane is crazy good. It's going to provide a massive boost to the party just through the ease of acquiring intel. Bypassing the limits on casting a divination is just crazy, crazy good. In fact, you're going to have to be prepared for your DM to nerf you, because if he doesn't nerf you, you're going to break the game. But he's going to probably compromise, so you are going to get something. So just note, Contact Other Plane is freaking amazing on this build. Rary's Telepathic Bond is also good, especially if you're trying to do the covert thing, but Contact Other Plane is the big add here. Oh, and we got an Infusions bump. So, okay, to our Infusions known, we are adding Cloak of Protection, Wing Boots, and Helm of Telepathy, dropping Bag of Holding, and we are making active Enhanced Arcane Focus, Enhanced Defense, Cloak of Protection, and Winged Boots. Note that means we had to drop the Repulsion Shield here, but we are still going to get an AC bump from the Cloak, and the fact that our Enhanced Arcane Focus and Enhanced Defense each bump to +2, so our AC is now 22. Cloak of Protection is also going to bump our saves. But the huge add, of course, is Winged Boots for elite maneuverability and defense. I mean, just one of the best uncommons in the game. An amazing add for us that allows us to control the range. We can drop Levitate. We can combo it with Rope Trick and put the portal way up high. You'll probably be able to just fly in and out of the portal, depending on DM discretion. And we have the Helm of Telepathy available for special occasions. This can be very useful on some missions if you need to gather intel. So good for that. See my deep dive series video on how great this game-breaking item is. And I gotta say, I do like the Helm of Awareness on this build, because if we acquire real magic items and offset the need for infusions, adding the Helm of Awareness is great for a blaster because we really want to win that initiative. And if we add that to this build, we're gonna basically win initiative all the time. So something to think about if you get real magic items. Finally, Magic Item Adept is online for 4 attunements and quick and cheap magic item construction. Such a fan of this. It is crazy good depending on your table and what your 4th item is, but to have a 4th attunement in a game balanced for 3 attunements is just so good. No change to our round 1 and 2, however, but we have now passed the elite DPR baseline by a whopping 0.2, so we just turned green. But still, we are exceeding the elite DPR baseline on a platform that can fly at will, has crazy good defenses, has all of these spells and synergies and infusions, and keeping pace with the fighter. This is just such a good build. And guys, we're about to take off and say, later suckers! Because when we get to level 11, spell storing item comes online, and our build starts to take off. We're going to give it to our familiar or a tiny servant to weaponize its concentration. Our familiar is going to be preferred as it doesn't require bonus action to direct. Although do note, if you feel compelled to put it on your tiny servant, the action economy can be managed with standing orders. This is all in the deep dive video. And we're going to load ours with Shatter. Shatter is a great blast when you can do it 10 times a day with offloaded action economy. It's going to do a little bit less damage than our Shatter since it's not going through the Arcane Focus, but 10.8 each to 2, 3, or 4 enemies. Yeah, guys, we are blasters, so we are loving this. So some notes for the DPR column. I'm assuming the enemy saves 40% of the time. It's saved for half. And so this is stacked onto our base DPR, which is already 31.3 relative to the elite DPR baseline of 34. So it's 90% of the baseline. And we have Shatter 10 times a day. That's going to add a variable amount of DPR, but it's a lot. And it's going to put us well above 120%. We're talking literally more than double the elite DPR baseline 10 times a day and 90% of it the rest of the time. That's why our DPR box is now white. We are significantly above the damage output of the elite DPR baseline. And guys, it gets crazier from here. At level 11, this build is insane when it comes to bringing the damage. One note, we are adding to our infusions known Hat of Disguise, dropping the spell Refueling Ring. It's just a better utility option for special occasions. To our rounds 1 and 2, we add the Shatter from our familiar or Tiny Servant, and otherwise no changes. But man, this build is really looking good. At level 12, we add Aid to our preps for defense and rest tricking, but as also a placeholder, which will drop at next level. More importantly, we get an ASI, and Lucky is online for those sweet rerolls. One of the best feats in the game. I love it. I always try to add it, and I just did. But no change to our round 1 and 2, or the damage situation. At level 13, we get 4th level spells. To our preps, we add Ice Storm, Wall of Fire, and Summon Construct, dropping Aid. Ice Storm and Wall of Fire came with the subclass. Ice Storm is not great, even for blasters. Its expected damage is less than Fireball. Even if it is a better damage type, I don't see casting this very often. But Wall of Fire is a nice add. Not much expected damage for a blast because it can really only affect 2 enemies by the calculations in the DMG. But it is persistent, so it's nice if your party has push options. And guess what? We have push options. We can use the Ballista and Thunderwave to push enemies into the Wall of Fire, so that can be cool. However, I like Summon Construct a lot better. This gives us some nice offensive support. Remember, we don't have these huge demands on our concentration like some of the other Artificer builds, so we can summon a Construct. And the Stone version is nice. It can keep enemies away from us because it's got that move debuff, and removing their reaction is nice, so I like it. We'll add it to our potential round 1 and 2 actions, but otherwise no changes. Level 14, a big level for us as we get an Infusions bump and 14th level Infusions come online. To our cantrips, we add Mending for utility and healing the cannon. To our preps, we add Resilient Sphere as an ultimate defense option for ourselves or an ally, and also as a decent save or suck. To our Infusions known, we add the Amulet of Health and Gem of Seeing. We'll make active the Amulet of Health to give us a huge hit point and con save bump. And we'll have the Gem of Seeing since that has some potential utility options for special occasions. And Magic Item Savant is online. 5 attunements, no restrictions on items. Just so good, depending on your table. No change to our round 1 and 2, and no change to the damage situation. But now we get to level 15, and this is a massive level for us because Fortified Position is online. We now have double Eldritch Cannons and a nice defensive bump in granting us half cover. So double cannons are awesome. We are using the double ballista here because you can see that the damage numbers are crazy. At level 15, it's 140% of the DPR baseline, or like 147 or something. It's crazy high, just with the ballistas, not even counting Shatter. It'll give us a better push for our persistent AoEs. I mean, it's just really, really sweet. However, I do want to point out that you could split it up and go with Ballista Protector, and that can be sweet. And keeping in mind that the Protector calls for you to be close, you could go with a Belt of Giant Strength Infusion and bump your melee abilities. You could add Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade at level 14 instead of Mending. And now you can mix it up in melee if you want to change it up from ranged, if you want to or if you have to. I prefer the double cannons here because we're Artillerists and we're about blowing stuff up, and blowing up stuff twice as much is just way more cooler to me, but I just wanted to point out that option. And man, half cover is such a nice little bump to your AC and dex saves. Note that the AoE does emanate from the cannon, so you're probably going to want to leave one of the ballistas near your back line with the ranged and the casters, and you might want to put one closer to the front line so that you can also cover your marshals. But remember that you do need to stay within 60 feet of it so that you can activate it. No change to our round 1 and 2, but again, 2 cannons, that is just so good, and our DPR is just so crazy good now. And we got here at level 15. I know most campaigns don't reach tier 4, so hitting it at level 15 is a big deal because this makes it viable in a lot more campaigns that play into tier 3. And if you do play into tier 4, getting this power level at 15 is really awesome. I am really, really impressed with the basic numbers of the Artillerist here. At level 16, to our preps, we add Freedom of Movement for utility and as a placeholder that will drop at the next level. More importantly, we get an ASI, which we'll use to add Alert. Huge initiative bump, never surprise, nice defense versus heavy obscurement. Remembering that, again, initiative is very important to blasters, so getting that bump is really sweet. And honestly, I just love the defensive benefits versus heavy obscurement. It's literally one of my favorite riders ever, so very happy to add it here. No change to our general approach, but our defenses are a lot better, so yay. At level 17, we reach tier 4 and our maximum DPR output. we're doing almost 54 damage relative to an elite DPR baseline of 34. Oh, so good. To our preps, we had Cone of Cold, Wall of Force, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, and Bigby's Hand, dropping Resilient Sphere and Freedom of Movement. Cone of Cold and Wall of Force came with a subclass. Cone of Cold is an okay blast for us. Since we're blasters, that's a good thing. Decent damage and decent energy type to decent amount of enemies. But the big add, of course, is Wall of Force. One of the best spells in 5th edition. So awesome. Especially when we combo it with Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound, because that's an auto win, guys. You can only do it once a day, but a once a day auto win is always really nice to have in your back pocket. I also like Bigby's Hand here as a versatile quote-unquote blast that actually provides a persistent defense, grapple, or push, with a preference for interposing and grappling, because those don't require your bonus action. Seriously, don't use it for Clenched Fist. That's like such a waste. My favorite's the interposing. I think that's a fantastic defense for a ranged or flying character because it just keeps people away from you. And we ignore the half cover that it creates and stuff. So yeah, it's really nice. No change to our round 1 and 2 or the damage. And as noted, our damage situation is awesome. They can't catch up to us even once they hit level 20, and we're already reaching these damage levels at 17. So good. At level 18, we get an Infusions bump and become Magic Item Masters. To our preps, we add Transmute Rock as one of the best controls in the game. No concentration is awesome. And it's another AoE that we can use our double ballistas and Thunderwave to push enemies into. To our Infusions known, we add Ring of Protection and Dimensional Shackles, making active the Ring of Protection. It's a self-explanatory add. Clearly the second best of the 14th level infusions after the Amulet of Health. Dimensional Shackle is another one of those utility ones that we might conceivably use one day. And Magic Item Master for 6 attunements, double the normal dude. So good. At level 19, we get our last ASI, so we add Tough for a massive hit point bump, otherwise no changes. And at level 20, we get our Capstone. To our preps, we add Wall of Stone and Greater Restoration. Both are solid. Both are unnecessary. It doesn't really matter. Just pick your poison. All that matters is that we've got Soul of Artifice online. Our saves are now redonkulous. And we've got a Quasi-Death Ward. Again, presuming that we've maxed out our 6 attunements. But yeah, that shouldn't be too hard at 20th level. So that's it. That is Bilbron Artillerist. And oh my god, what is up with this build? It is so good at destroying things. I mean, who would have thunk it with the name Artillerist? I'm really surprised, guys. It wasn't until I did this 1-20 build and optimized it, which was a ton of work, of course. And again, shout out to my boys in the Patreon Discord for helping me with that. Now that I see the final product, my eyes are popped. It is really good at bringing the damage. I mean, it just crushes the elite DPR baseline. And all the other stuff. I mean, wow. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd be very curious to know what everybody thinks. Regardless, thank you so much for watching. This has been Bilbrons and Dragons. I'm your host, Bilbron Battlestone. See you next time.